Let's take you now to that Eskom briefing, giving us an update on what's happening with the grid. Of course, we're all on stage 6, rolling blackouts. Let's hear what's behind that.
Catastrophic hydrogen explosion in the generator of that unit. That is scheduled to return to service in September of 2024, so next year. And then something that we don't talk about a lot, but is still very relevant, is the fact that we have a load loss due to high ambient temperatures impacting the efficiency of our cooling system at Matimba. And currently we are sitting with a 600 megawatt load loss because of the warm summer weather at Lephalale. And if you add all of that together, that gives you more than 5,000 megawatts that are essentially structurally not available. Now, as you know, the balance of our fleet is old, it is unreliable, and consequently, when we then have incidents like we had at Letabo, where we lost 2 units due to coal constraints, and then a further unit due to a boiler tube leak, then the shortfall in generation capacity becomes very urgent indeed. Now, we are intending to return some units to service. We are looking at Letabo Unit 4, 5 and 2. Those are the 3 units that are out, and also a unit at Camden. And then following that, we are looking at returning by the end of today about 3,000 megawatts of capacity, followed by a further 2,000 megawatts each for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That will significantly alleviate the current constraint that we face in terms of generation capacity and will reduce the risk. But where we are right now, given the fact that we are running our open cycle gas turbines hard, we have no option but to implement load shedding stage 6. The forecast therefore is that we will have load shedding stage 6 prevailing until Wednesday evening peak, and by Thursday we will then be able to start phasing that down to load shedding stage 4, with load shedding stage 3 being reached by the weekend. We are able to utilize our open cycle gas turbines. Diesel, we did experience a constraint over the weekend with some off-spec diesel at our Gerikwa plant. There was an issue with the conductivity of the diesel. This relates to the ability of the diesel to resist electrostatic charges when it is being transported at high speed. And this was successfully resolved through blending, but we also lost some time there while that particular characteristic was being blended away. That has now been resolved, so diesel should no longer be a constraint. We also have resolved our funding issue with regard to diesel, so we are now able to procure diesel with the backing of National Treasury, which we are, of course, very grateful for. The situation at our pumped hydro storage schemes, of course, is impacted by the very high rainfall levels. And this has an impact on particularly Ingula, which is a closed system. So it has an upper dam and a lower dam, but there is no outflow apart from a wetland downstream. So we have to, when both dams are full, which clearly makes it impossible to generate electricity by letting down water from the upper dam, when that lower dam is full, we have to gradually release water through the Ingula wetland. If we do so too quickly, we create the risk of flooding in downstream towns, which of course we want to avoid. So we are looking at slowly improving that situation. We are releasing about 100,000 cubic meters of water per hour at Ingula. Drakensberg, because it is connected to the Tugela River, doesn't have a similar constraint, so we're not impacted there. So all in all, we do face a very constrained situation right at this point in time. We appeal to the public to use electricity sparingly, please. If you have any lights that you can switch off, or if you have any air conditioners that are running that you don't require, please switch those off. And if you're able to assist us by really being mindful of your electricity consumption, that will be very much appreciated. With that, colleagues, I'm going to ask our acting group executive for generation, Thomas Conradi. Thomas, is there anything that you wish to add? Maybe you can explain the situation at Letabo in some greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. As indicated at Letabo, we've had the situation that we unfortunately had units being forced shutdown and not able to return 2 of those as a result of coal constraints. We've experienced excessive rain in the area, and what also aggravated the situation is this with the Vaal River system. Those that know the area there, the Vaal River is like the border of the mining area there, and adjacent to the mining pit. That with the very high levels on the Vaal River system, there was or there's still a real risk of flooding and a flood warning for the pit. That further impacted the areas that the mine can potentially mine. So there's been a lot of work done, both in terms of from the mine in conjunction with Primary Energy Division in Eskom, to firstly get areas in the mine where we can extract coal from today. And again, it's weather dependent. And the latest feedback I've received, although we've had some clearing up of the weather earlier today, there was another downpour now in the afternoon in the vicinity or at the mine itself. Also, in parallel to that, we are looking at areas on the strategic stockpile where the coal is not that wet, and where we can extract a product that will be able that we can handle it through the system to bring in coal. But as we still stand risk of losing a unit at Unit 2 currently is at risk at Letabo, and we're closely monitoring to keep the running units going at Letabo. Maybe just also in terms of the units returned, it's good that we have managed to return the Medupi Unit 5 this afternoon, which returned about 2 o'clock. Also, just earlier, Majuba 6 as well as Majuba 4 early in the morning, that is returned. And we're still pressing to get Camden 8 also to return to service still today. And then as also indicated to if we can get coal supply better established and more reliable to Letabo to return 1 or more of the units of Letabo tomorrow, also at Tucana Camden unit. All in all, we had to apply the also the stage 6 load shedding over the weekend. I see that there was a question also relating to the Koeberg incident that we've experienced over the weekend, where we've incurred a trip on Koeberg Unit 2. And the reason for that is that we've had a trip coming from Channel 1 on the turbine protection side. So it was not a reactor trip, but only the turbine that trip. It was a planned intervention that we've scheduled for the Friday, because the Friday evening, because of a risk of a trip, but it was necessary to do that, to do a card change. And on the card change, we did have then the trip that occurred, and subsequently, with the reactor not being tripped and the team being able to keep the reactor at low power whilst rectifying the problem on the turbine, the unit then actually returned very well overnight to the next morning. The impact that it had in a larger scheme is that it did impact us in not having adequate pumping capability overnight because of that loss of the megawatts from the 900 megawatts from Kuberg. And that then resulted us in not being able to do the extent of pumping that we would normally have done overnight on the Friday evening. I will pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I think that concludes the overview. Sikonati, let's then, I think, go immediately to our questions and answers. I think Jan Oberholzer has not joined us unless he's here and if he wishes to add something. If he's not, then I think let's go straight to Q&A.
Thank you, Andre. Jan Oberholzer will be landing at 3:30, so he's en route to South Africa at this point. Andre, before we go on to the questions, I'm going to ask you to give us a bit of information on the diesel funding that you alluded to, and that obviously will be quite a matter of interest for the media. How much money have we secured and how and for what period, please? Thank you.
So, Sikonati, it's not a definite amount because we are obviously continuing to consume diesel, to buy diesel as we go on. But we have obtained the support of National Treasury to give assurance to the banks from whom we are borrowing money to buy the diesel that National Treasury will stand behind these loans, and that has given us the ability to ease the liquidity constraint, and we can therefore continue to purchase the requisite diesel to maintain the supply to our open cycle gas turbines.
Thank you, Andre. That deals with William Horn's question. Mohammed, you've got quite a great sense of humor. I have now put on for you a beautiful background. Let's deal with William's questions first. The diesel matter has now been dealt with properly. William, you want to know, is there an official provision being made for stage 8? And if not, why not? Has the National Defence Force made any arrests, prevented any suspicious activity at any power stations as of yet? Andre, our load shedding timetable allows us to implement up to stage 8 load shedding. Let me invite Sekhumoto to perhaps comment on that question. And Karen Pillay, I am not sure if she's online yet. Colleagues, if anyone is not here, please do bear in mind the short notice. Other people had appointments they couldn't come. Sekhumoto, are you able to talk to us about stage 8, please? I do not think we have Sekhumoto on the line here, Andre. Please talk to us. Can you address the question and indeed the one for the security? Thank you.
So again, just to reiterate that the reason that we implement load shedding in the first instance is to allow us to maintain a 50 hertz frequency on the grid. If we were to lose that frequency because of a shortage of generation capacity, we will then have a total grid collapse, and that will take anything from 10 to 14 days to resolve, and will no doubt have very severe negative impact. So load shedding is the lever that we use to protect the system from a total blackout. I just had a conversation half an hour ago with our national system operator, Isabel Fick, and she again gave me the assurance that the probability of a total system blackout remains very low because of the fact that we have the levers of load shedding, but also the support of our major industrial and mining customers in implementing load curtailment, which then assists us in managing demand during peaks where we have very high demand. So we do have contingency plans in place should there be a further loss in generation capacity. At this point in time, we do not anticipate that there is a risk of going beyond stage 8. So that is part of our contingency planning that is in place. I don't particularly want to elaborate too much on that, but I can give the country the assurance that we're doing everything in our power to ensure that we do not end up in a situation where we go beyond that. I think the further 2,000 megawatts that remains at our disposal is more than adequate to offset any further issues. But of course, the system has an inherent lack of reliability, and that gives us the need to plan for these unforeseen events. So at this point in time, the anticipation is that we will remain at stage 6 load shedding until past evening peak on Wednesday, and probably going until 5 o'clock on Thursday morning, after which time we will go to load shedding stage 4. So at this stage, no need for us to contemplate going any further than that. If I can also deal with the question raised around the SANDF. The SANDF, of course, doesn't have powers of arrest. These arrests are carried out by the South African Police Services. They have now made, I think the last tally that I saw was 48 arrests. And these arrests are of people actively involved in various criminal activities throughout Eskom. In particular, in Mpumalanga, coal theft, issues related to damage of plant and so forth. And we're very pleased that we are now seeing some significant progress in the battle against crime and corruption, that we are not in a as vulnerable as we have historically been. However, we still need to get to the higher echelons of these syndicates, and this is where we anticipate that some of the intelligence that we are sharing with the SSA as well as with crime intelligence, that this will start to bear fruit. Arresting the foot soldiers by themselves is not going to help us with addressing the issue. Thanks, Ukunati.
I thank you, Andre. Lamise Omarji from News 24. Your question on Quebec, Thomas really dealt with that in significant detail before you asked it. And we also did issue a statement that explained exactly what happened to that during the last week. Thomas, I'm going to ask you to give an update on the energy availability factor on that. And then the question from Christian Engel of Cape August is, did Eskom postpone some of its planned maintenance to avoid going into stage 8 load shedding last night? Thomas, Andre, can I ask you to switch off your camera so we allow Thomas to come in? Thank you.
Thank you, Sikonati. Firstly, then to deal with the question relating to the energy availability factor. Currently, our year-to-date energy availability factor is just over 53%, which is very low. And the question also been asked, and where I've also gave some indication earlier in previous meetings, is that for us to achieve 60% by year end is not possible, given that we've only got a few weeks left in the financial year. What has really set us back in not achieving the 60%, which we were working towards, was also the fact that we've got this very high unplanned unavailability that we're currently experiencing, combined also with the planned maintenance that we are doing. Bearing in mind that when we were doing our projections and our forecasting for year end, we didn't anticipate for the Kusile units, all three, to be off for the extended period that they now going to be off. Adding to the question that's been asked relating to the plant maintenance situation, yes, we originally did plan for higher plant maintenance. Not to disregard that we've had a fairly high PCLF, also plant maintenance opportunity now over this Christmas New Year period, and we will still see high PCLF plant maintenance up till until about Easter, and we will see towards the end of the financial year there will still be high plant maintenance. We did, however, following when it became clear that we're not going to have the Kusile units returning earlier and being available sooner, we then had to redo our capacity plan. And what it basically saying, to take into consideration that 2,160 megawatts will not be available, we had to critically look at our outage schedule, also to see where we can optimize. We could manage to optimize on some of the outages, not to compromise safety or statutory outages in any way. So those we continue to doing our philosophy outages also, but we had to also relook at that, and that obviously is aggravated by the high levels of unplanned unavailability that we are currently experiencing. Yes, if we've had a further 2,000 planned maintenance currently on the go, it would have impacted us and on even higher stages of load shedding. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I assume this is Banele Gininza from Independent Newspapers, the next set of questions. Has the frequency of transformer blowouts increased comparatively with the frequency of load shedding? Mondebala is the Group Executive for Distribution. He is going to help answer that question. Monde, are you seeing more transformers being blown out during load shedding in your areas? And before you come in, Bele, can I ask the last 3 questions from him as well? Has Eskom had to make higher financial provision for the procurement and repair of transformers, especially since it had to resort to continuous load shedding? That's again for you, sir. And let's take this last one, this third one for him. How has the spike in cable theft, particularly when power lines are down, affected Eskom's cost overruns? Monde?
Yeah, no, thanks, Konati, and thanks to Banele for the questions. In as far as transformers are concerned, we have not noticed a significant spike in the transformer failures. We have, however, noticed a significant increase in the failure of other equipment, such as our breakers and some of our cables, which are overly exposed. This leads into the next question of us experiencing a significant number of infrastructure theft and vandalism, specifically during the times of load shedding, because the criminals out there, they know that if it's a 2-hour session of load shedding, they've got 2 hours to do their nefarious activities. Yes, this has increased quite tremendously our repair costs, which then has affected our maintenance budget quite significantly. Yeah, Schoenert, I believe I have touched on all the three questions. Thank you.
And before you go, Monday, have you had to fire any of our contractors due to cable theft?
Yeah, at this point in time, we are following whatever reports are submitted to us. We do have reports of some of our staff and some of our contractors that may be involved in these activities. Yeah, I think when we do get those reports, we take it through the law enforcement, through our security. But yeah, I cannot confirm at this point in time whether or not we have fired any of our contractors for these activities.
Thank you, Monday. I must add, Banele, on that it's not just a matter of firing someone. One of their employees were caught stealing a cable. There's a whole process that would need to be undertaken in order to establish the guilt or otherwise of the employer themselves. And there are, of course, disciplinary measures where contractor employees have been caught in the wrong. Antoinette Slave, your question has really been answered by Thomas on whether there is any chance of reaching 60% EAF by the end of this March 2023. So I'm going to take Siphelele Hluda's question. He is from Business Report. Has Eskom been planning or communicating around stage 8 load shedding contingency measures? Again, Andre has really dealt with that, but maybe I can, in Isabel, to come in and give us comment on any contingency plans for stage 8 load shedding. She is the general manager in the system operator's office. Isabel, please.
Good afternoon. We are currently in the process of reviewing the document that governs the load shedding, NRSO 48-9. This is a NERSA document. It is also being put to the industry. Therefore, it is still busy going through the governance processes. Yes, we are looking at the different stages of load shedding. In terms of contingency, we do have contingency should we reach stage 8. We will then give the necessary levels through to the other control centers. But as Andre has mentioned, we don't anticipate that at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm taking the next question coming from Craig Mocker. It is noted from a recent analysis by Darrell Hunt that Eskom would have saved 3 billion rand if it had switched from diesel to term and not spot LNG to generate the same 1.9 terawatt hours in 2022. Noting that Thomas Conradi confirmed that Eskom would release an LNG supply request for proposal in a recent media briefing. Is Eskom considering to include LNG supply as part of its emergency response plan? Thomas, you did talk to this during last week, but maybe Andre or Tom Skinner is also here to talk to us about the options there. Thank you.
Yeah, Sikanati, let me have a stab at that. Yes, based on current term prices, LNG would indeed be more cost effective than diesel. Of course, if we had a wholesale license, then the saving would be far smaller, but that's a topic for another day. But in order for us to use LNG at scale, we would need to be able to import the LNG, gasify it again, and then transport it to probably Ankerlig, but also possibly including Gerikwa. And this requires a significant investment in infrastructure. It also requires pressure reducing stations and so forth. Now, because our likely utilization of natural gas is too low to warrant investment in importation facilities, what we are looking for is an aggregator of demand, which will then enable us to import gas and in conjunction with other consumers of gas. and that should then assist the overall reduction in fuel costs, particularly at Ankerlig. If we are to pursue a 3,000 megawatt that will be a combined cycle gas turbine project at Richards Bay, that will justify an FSRU and also associated pipeline infrastructure. However, we wish to buy gas over the fence at a contractually determined price and at a certain pressure and a certain volume. We do not particularly wish to invest in gas infrastructure. So again, for the Richards Bay project, we are looking at somebody who can aggregate that demand. We are discussing the matter with Transnet. Sikanati, just also in response to Bonelli's question on action taken against contractors, we have recently issued letters to 15 companies and or directors who have, in our opinion, and after thorough consideration, been guilty of transgressing Eskom's Supplier Integrity Pact. There are a further 230 of these cases that our Supplier Review Committee needs to work through. But as you said, this is a very difficult process because it is subject to legal challenge, so we have to make absolutely sure before we issue such a letter. Thanks.
Thank you, Andre. Thomas, I'm going to give you the next two questions, one from Antoinette Slavet. Can you say now what you will do differently in future to ensure that maintenance is more effectively? And that is on your coal plant, because last week you did indicate that there were discussions about improving the performance of the power stations. Let's link that to Kyle's question. 24. This marks the fourth time in the past 2 months that Eskom has been forced to implement stage 6 load shedding. Is this indicative of coal units reaching a level of unreliability that has not been seen before? In other words, is Eskom seeing a higher level of unreliability over the last couple of months compared to the same period last year? Thomas?
Thank you very much. Firstly, to respond to say that yes, the maintenance of our plant is a key factor in terms of the poor performance of our plant. Although there are also other reliability issues that we need to address in terms of the amount of trips that we're incurring on the plant. In a number of cases, those trips are also as a result of a plant failure. Or of a specific incident that happened on the plant, causing the plant to actually trip. We realize that a lot needs to be done in terms of improving our maintenance. That is both in terms of online maintenance, meaning whilst the plant is running, and there we're also dealing with some of the systemic issues, making sure that we've got spares and the right quality of spares, the right level of workmanship and quality being applied while we're maintaining the plant. We have seen in the past that we are paying the price also in terms of plant not as reliable and available as we want due to not the best of maintenance practices being applied, or the wrong quality of spares being used on our plant. And that obviously takes some time to work it out. We are also have changed our approach towards being much more selective in terms of making sure that our suppliers are reputable suppliers, that they are able to do the work to the levels of quality. We're also engaging with original equipment manufacturers of specific machinery, especially complex machinery, where we believe it is, for the OEM to support us in terms of maintaining those plants. Now, a lot of generations improvement that we require in terms of the performance of the plant will come from our planned maintenance interventions. These are the outages that we do have, the offline maintenance that we need to do. And yes, we are not seeing yet the level of performance that we want from these outages. We are investing a lot in terms of improving our outage readiness, making sure that we procure the long lead spares upfront, having all contracts secured with reputable suppliers, and be in a position that when that unit goes on outage to have a very well set up plan, a project plan, and being able to execute that outage best once the breaker opens. We are closely monitoring also in terms of what we're experiencing a post-outage, in terms of if we do have further breakdowns or non-availability after the event, after the outage, and by that to understand if it's a scoping problem, are we not doing all the work that we can or should have done on that unit, or is it a matter of quality of workmanship or other reasons that unit is not delivering to the expectation post outage. So there's a lot going into in terms of the outage, the maintenance improvement on our plant, both routine maintenance. We're also investing in terms of all the maintenance practices, the planning of work and the execution thereof, both online and offline maintenance. In terms of the question relating to the stage 6 and if that's indicative of the plant further deteriorating, I think what aggravates the situation here and why we've particularly went into stage 6, yes, we have seen a high number of trips in the last 2 days, but it is also aggravated by the fact that we've had really battling at the number of plants also with coal qualities, and we've had also incidents of loss of units as a result of a coal supply to our plants. If you take a plant like Letaba Power Station, who is normally running quite well, and having 3 of those units off currently, that obviously has got a significant impact of 1800 megawatts of those 3 units. And that's mainly, as I've indicated earlier, relating to the inclement weather and the coal supply problems towards that to that plant. So I think it's a combination of the plant not performing as we want in terms of the reliability and availability of the fleet, combined to these specific incidents that we've had now lately. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to ask Isabel Fick to come back to start first with the question from Susan Comrie of Amapungane. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the particular question. Eskom previously said it would release its long-term outlook in mid-February. Are you able to share that document now? If not, could you confirm whether or not Eskom plans to maintain the baseline of 13,000 megawatts of unplanned capacity losses going forward, or will this be revised up or downwards? Isabel, before you answer that, let's link it to the questions from Gloria Sifako from the SABC. How far are the plans to import power from Zambia and Mozambique to supplement Eskom's capacity? And lastly, from Business Tech, Quinton Bronkhorst wants to know how many megawatts are currently being cut through load reduction and load curtailment. He says some areas in Centurion, for example, have been moved to a load curtailment schedule. Can we expect more areas being moved onto this type of schedule? Sabra?
A lot of questions there. Thanks, Sukunati. Let's start with Susan. I'm not sure what you refer to if you talk about the long-term outlook. From our side, we do a winter plan and a summer plan, and the winter plan is done and released in March, not in April. So no, we don't have a document to share at this point. In terms of the baseline, you're working on the 3 scenarios that we pressure test the capacity plan on. But that would be the base scenario at this stage is 13,000 plus 1.5 plus 1.5. We will review the performance and then adjust the baseline as necessary. From what we see right now, yes, it could possibly be moved up to a higher level. In terms of load curtailment or load reduction, I think we have a bit of problems with terminology here. Load curtailment is what we do in terms of our large customers who are able to assist us by dropping load when we are constrained. So that is a different scenario than what I think you are talking to, because you're talking to localized events in the Centurion area, which would typically be domestic and smaller industries, and those would fall under the Tshwane municipality and not under Eskom. So I really can't speak to what is happening there. From our perspective, we issue the order for load shedding, and then the specific amount of load per area needs to be shed. How that is done resides with the specific municipalities or metros.
Thank you, Isabel. Before you go, please, can you just answer quickly Lamise's question? Is load curtailment being implemented with industrial users?
Sorry, Signati, is it implemented with?
Industrial users, please.
Yes, we do have contracts with large industrial users. It is built into their contracts that we can actually curtail them. So it is part of the contract and the tariff structure for those customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Chris, your question on Quebec 2, was the trip a mistake or expected when relating to an electronic card? Chris, I do not think we have Keith in this meeting here. We can help you offline later with your question, but we did deal with the Quebec question quite significantly. Oh, Keith is in there. He's just raised his hand. Keith, please come in and assist us here.
So, yes, thanks, Ikonati. And in responses to Chris's question, it was ultimately, if you look at it, any trip when you're doing work like that is a human error, but it was a high-risk activity that we had identified the need to do the work. I think it was around about Tuesday during the week. Because of the high risk of trip with the activity that was needed, we scheduled with transmission and system operating to do it on Friday night. The work that was being done, we had done something similar in the past. There was a lot of precautions that were taken, which was why we were able to turn around the unit so quickly from the event that happened. But we are still trying to internalize exactly why the unit tripped during that replacement. It was clearly the replacement of the card that resulted in the trip, but we don't know the exact reasons why. That is, so it's still under investigation. But clearly, if you take it to the true essence of the word, because it was a human involved in doing the work, you have to say it was human error. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Colleagues, Keith Featherstone is the Chief Nuclear Officer. Keith, please do lower your hand so we can move on to the next one. Deneen Erasmus from Business Day. Are there any emergency measures in place, and would it be practically possible to source coal from other suppliers if the supplier to Letabo continues to be affected by rain and flooding? Thomas, you really did deal with that and with digging into the strategic stockpile to alleviate the pressures at Letabo. Do you want to add anything to Deneen's question, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the question also. Yes, in fact, we have imported some coal via truck also over the weekend, although fairly small volumes. One must appreciate that to really bring in the amount of coal that's been consumed by a power plant like Letabo, especially who's burning a fairly low CV coal, you don't overnight can get that infrastructure and that the logistics established to get all the coal being imported, and also taking into mind that Letabo is fairly removed from the Mpumalanga coal fields here in the northern Free State. So yes, we did import some coal. We don't foresee that this the problem is going to be persistent for weeks on end, and that's why we are hopeful that if the weather gives us a break, and which is indicating that we will get some break as from tomorrow, that we will be able to normalize matters at Letaba. Also to take note that there is a lot of coal at Letaba with a stockpile. It is just very wet. Also in transporting coal to the power station itself, whilst it's raining, and you also got the risk of bringing a very wet product to the station, which will then defeat the object. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. The next question comes from Rorisang Hosana from Times Live. Since 2 units at Koeberg will be operating during July and August, does that mean we will expect low stages of load shedding during the winter months? Andre, I think you have to repeat what you said about Koeberg and about Kusile and about Medupi, the unit there, in order to give us the prognosis going into the winter. Can you help us with that? And you have already dealt with the question of diesel and gas at the OCGTs, which has dealt with Helmo's questions. Do you want to come in there, please?
Yeah, Siganati, I really don't have too much else to add. I think we covered it fairly extensively in my introduction. So maybe if Helmo can elaborate on these questions, but I have nothing further to add there. Thanks.
Andre, the question before that, please, from the one immediately, the one on winter load shedding. The prognosis is that, or the plan is to return Unit 1 of Koeberg late June. Rorisang wants to know if that means lower stages of load shedding during the winter months, since the other unit will be running as well.
Right, apologies for that. No, it doesn't necessarily mean the lower stages of load shedding. It obviously is planned to return for those 2 months because of the fact that we want to cater for higher demand during winter season. During winter, our plants generally operate very well. First of all, we have lower planned maintenance. This is to again create capacity on the system for the higher demand. We also have colder air, which means that our vacuum load losses are abated, and cold air is denser, so there is more available oxygen, which enhances combustion, so that helps. And then also we have typically no rain in the Mpumalanga area during winter, which helps us with any negative impact of rain on coal quality. So the outlook for winter is not entirely gloomy, but we do expect higher demand because of the colder weather. Thanks.
Thank you, Andre. Colleagues.
Well, we come out of that briefing. A very good afternoon to you. If you just joined us, this is SA Today with me, Unathi Patyasha. Well, essentially, Eskom concluding its briefing as the country experiences load shedding stage 6. On Sunday, several generating units, as you know, suffered breakdowns and were then taken offline. The utility this afternoon saying that the energy availability factor is a rather very low at just over 53%. And of course, the CEO there, Andre de Ruyter, saying that the probability of a total blackout remains very low. Also saying that the company does have contingency plans in place should we reach stage 8 load shedding. The utility also says because of the high number of the generation unit breakdowns, there is possibility, of further changes on the load shedding stages at short notice. The power utility has been implementing stage 6 rolling blackout since last night, and this will continue until Wednesday evening, we told in that briefing. Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Manjanja saying that a generating unit each at Arnott, Hendrina, Letabo, and Majuba, as well as 2 units at Camden power stations, suffered breakdowns yesterday afternoon.